Hi there, and welcome to A Journey to Milk and Honey. Thank y'all for joining me today. This journey of mine/ours, like all journeys, will have its ups and downs. That said, today we are going to scratch the surface of the history of and the possible reasons for anti-Semitism, or what I now call Jew hatred. And the reason that I call anti-Semitism Jew hatred is because though I consider myself most of the time a relatively intelligent person, the actual words anti-Semitism really were kind of benign to me for all of my life. And that is because Jew hatred has not been a huge problem in my life. But the events of October 7th, 2023 woke me up. Yes, you could say I became woke to the horror and the fact that Jew hatred is real. And as I often say, you'd have to be living under a rock today to deny that it exists and has always existed. So I guess I was living under a rock. As I've told folks over and over, my very first thought when I heard of the massacre of October 7th was, why the Jews? Why always the Jews? So today we're going to jump into that question with filmmaker and author Raphael Shore, who recently released his book entitled Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew? And just so y'all know, your favorite and only host of this podcast, me, is actually in this book. So hold tight and I'll be right back with Raphael.
My name is Liz Gabert, and my story begins in the Baptist Bible Belt of West Texas. I married a Catholic man, and together we raised 3 children internationally. Through my travels and experiences, my Jewish faith became secondary to everyday life. Now, after some incredibly powerful events that transpired recently, I'm at a place and time in my life to delve into my Jewish faith. I invite you to join me on this journey where I and an amazing array of weekly guests will enlighten you about the faith, people, and innovations that have shaped Israel and the Jewish people's rich history. Welcome to A Journey to Milk and Honey.
Hey there, just a quick reminder before we get started. If you want to connect with us, we're on all major social media platforms at JMH Podcast. And you can find us on YouTube at JMH Podcast or A Journey to Milk and Honey. You can also find us online at ajourneytomilkandhoney.com or jmhpodcast.com. Oh, and if you enjoy what we do here at A Journey to Milk and Honey, you can help support us by liking, subscribing, or leaving us reviews wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you for joining me. All right, let's get started. I want to introduce you all today to Raphael Shore. Raphael is an acclaimed filmmaker and human rights activist, globally recognized for his role in empowering Jewish identity and raising awareness of the dangers of anti-Semitism. As founder of Open Door Media and the Clarion Project, Raphael has established himself as a voice of reason in a crowded and hostile media landscape. To date, Raphael's documentaries and feature films have amassed hundreds of millions of viewers and won multiple awards. Raphael's 2 current projects, a book entitled Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew? And a film entitled The Tragic Awakening, are visions developed over a lifetime. Each delves into the heart of Jew hatred, be it Nazi or radical Islam, and in both camps, Raphael finds surprising and life-affirming answers to the age-old question, and my question, why the Jews?
Hey, Raphael, thank you for joining me today. I'm very excited about this opportunity, I got to tell you.
I am too, Liz. It's a pleasure to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
So, we had just started talking, and now we're formally talking, but I wanted to share with you and everyone that I actually have read your entire book. And it was, for me, the perfect book at the perfect time, if that makes any sense.
Well, I'm thrilled. I am so thrilled to hear that. I'll tell you something also. So, first of all, that makes me very, very happy to hear because I've been working 3 years on the book, and you never know how it's going to land after you put in so much effort. And so to hear that is very heartwarming, and I'm thrilled. At the same time, you should know I've been sitting on this book. I think I say it in the introduction, but I was sitting on this book for the most part for 30 plus years because I was concerned that the message was so strong that the world was not quite ready to hear it. And I think you're right. After October 7th and the world that we're living in today, it lands now. And so I think I was right for waiting a few decades to deliver this message.
Gosh, it sure does. And before we get started talking about your book, Raphael, you have a very interesting upbringing. So could you please share a little bit about yourself with our listeners?
Yes, I'm happy to do that. And the most recently, I'm the author of this book that you just read, which is called Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew? Learning to Love the Lessons of Jew Hatred. This is who I am most recently. Who I am for the past 30, 40 years is a Jewish person who grew up in small town Canada, London, Ontario, Canada. It's about a 2-hour drive from Detroit and a 2-hour drive from Toronto, right in smack dab in the middle, small town. I grew up there. And then in university, I was exposed to Judaism in a way that I had not been exposed to as a kid. And I said, wow, this is amazing. What a heritage we belong to. And too bad nobody shared that with me in an effective way. And so I embraced being Jewish. I embraced Judaism. I'd already been to Israel a couple of times and fell in love with the country and the people. And so as soon as I graduated university, I made Aliyah, which is the expression for saying I went up. And I moved the land of Israel to be part of the only Jewish country in the world. And that's where I've been living for the past 40 years. And because I got inspired with being Jewish, I have basically dedicated my life to sharing the beauty and wisdom of our heritage with both Jews and non-Jews. And that's what I've been doing, a few different organizations and culminating now in this book.
So there is one anecdote that you mention in your book that I would love for you to share with our listeners. And it has to do with the fact that at the age of 20, your twin brother actually found God and that his revelation really had an impact on you. Is that correct?
Exactly. We were like, what the heck is going on over here? Because it's funny, but, because the Jewish people, and this is what I talk about in the book, the Jewish people really are the God people. Like, this is what we brought into the world, ethical monotheism and Christianity. And it's wonderful. But growing up and you know this, Liz, because we've talked about this in the past, growing up as a young, fairly assimilated Jew in North America, I had no idea. I have no idea. I remember when I first started to learn about it, one of my rabbis said, the Jewish people are such a spiritual people. I was like, what? What are you talking about? Like, I can think of many adjectives: smart, talented, ambitious, spiritual. I was just never exposed to it, never heard about it. So when I was 20 and my brother found God and he started to study in a yeshiva, which is an institute of Jewish higher learning where you study the Torah in depth, it was just shocking to our nuclear family and our extended families. What is this young Jew doing? So I went 2 years later to find out what he was doing and to explore it myself. I thought he was crazy, so I was hoping to get him out of the institution. And I failed. I'd say I failed. I failed miserably in my mission. So instead of getting him out, I got in. And I was very fortunate that I learned how meaningful and wise our Jewish tradition is.
God, you're blessed. I mean, now here I am at my age, it's just kicking in. But
Beautiful.
as they say, better late than never.
Better late than never. And you are an inspiration, Reese. Yeah.
Well, we'll get to that part. So moving ahead here, do you mind just sharing with us a little bit about October 7th? Where were you? What were you doing?
Yes, I am happy to share. So October 7th was the holiday of Simchat Torah. which means the joy of the Torah. It's a very joyous day in the Jewish calendar. It's a very holy day. It's the culmination of the holiday of Sukkot, known as the Feast of Tabernacles. It's a 7-day holiday, culminating in the holiday of Simchat Torah, where we spend the entire morning dancing around, holding the Sefer Torah, the scrolls of the Torah, and dancing around and singing. And I was in a minyan, which is a quorum of men and women that were praying and dancing and singing. And the people that I were with was a lot of people who are in security and police and stuff. So we started, with the sirens started to go, which was highly unusual in Jerusalem. I was in Jerusalem. Highly unusual. So we knew, okay, that means that missiles were sent to Jerusalem, which is only happened a couple times, even though they've been firing tens of thousands of missiles at the country over the past few years. It was pretty unusual for it to come towards Jerusalem because they don't aim so well, so they might knock out their own people and their own institutions. And so we knew something strange was going on. But then, because there's security people, even though like on Shabbat, the people I'm praying with don't use phones, and we don't use electricity and things like that on our holy days. But security people do, for the sake of saving lives. You're allowed to use these devices on the Sabbath and holidays. And so we had a number of people like that. So they started to get the word. And then as we were praying and as it was going on, because it's a long service, several hours, we started to hear more and more information. And we started to understand that it was probably the biggest terror attack that Israel's ever faced was going on. And there was an infiltration of build a scale. We had no clue. And ironically, and I tell this story, I think in the end of the book, in my minyan, in my service, were 3 young people praying with us whose brother was at the Nova festival that was being attacked at that moment. And they didn't know that their brother was there. So they were participating in the service with us. And subsequently, they found out that he was killed. He was one of the people just at that festival who were killed. Out of the 1,200 people were killed on that day. And these are my neighbors. These are people who my children grew up with, who lived on my little street. And so it was touching home already on October 7th. And it went from a day of joy to a day of great sadness.
Absolutely. I'm almost speechless when I hear stories like yours from folks who were there. I felt the same but different, and which is weird. It was just that October 7th sort of just changed my life. I mean, just my future, it feels like, and my path going forward, which I don't know what to say. I'll leave it at there.
Let me riff on what you're saying. One of the things that I talk about in my book is that God is according to Judaism, and I address this. God is inserted into the creation a tool, and that is that anti-Semitism wakes up Jews. When Jewish people assimilate, God says no. So on an individual basis, Jews can successfully assimilate. But as a nation, we're an eternal nation. God gave us a special role to play in this world. And if we, using our free will as human beings, as the nation of Israel, if we try to abdicate our responsibility, God says no. And how does God say no? He says, I need you. I need you to keep doing it. So he has to send, unfortunately, non-Jews to remind us. And that's called anti-Semitism. They remind us that we're not them, that we're Jewish and we're not Jewish. And so in every generation, it's been so consistent that Jewish people sometimes forget who we are. Like in pre-Holocaust, the German Jews were so assimilated. And then in Germany, that's where it happened. And the Jews thought they were becoming Germans. They thought they were becoming Frenchmen who just happened to be Jewish as a little side thing. but then they were reminded that they are Jewish. And that's what happened on October 7th. Our generation, just like your story, we thought it was a cultural tidbit that we're Jewish. October 7th comes and says, no, it's not a cultural tidbit. It's who you are. It's the essence of who you are. And you have a role to play, and you have a mission to be a light unto nations. And God says, please go back to your mission.
Yeah. Sort of a wake-up call, right? I mean, that's
100%.
That's
A
what we're
wake-up
talking
call.
about here. Okay, the title of your book. I mean, when you first told, I was just like, what's this about? Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew? And it's a subtitle, Learning to Love the Lessons of Jew Hatred. I mean, where did you get that? And when did you get that? Because you say this has been in process, but have you had that for years?
No. I didn't know what the book was going to be called for the longest time. I invited into my inner circle to help me brainstorm some very creative friends. And I said, let's brainstorm. This is what the book's about. How do we name this? I'll tell you a name that we had that we got ultimately rejected, but it was for a little while. It was going to be the name. It was Hitler's Chosen People.
But you state that in the book.
Yes, that's right. One of the chapters is still called Hitler's Chosen People. But very good, very good. So that was going to be the name of the book. And then I went out with that, and I started to get feedback, and it was like too much. Pull it back, buddy, pull it back. But you can see by that attempt, and then ultimately landing on Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew as the title, you can understand that I was looking for something provocative.
Yes.
This book, my purpose of it is to start conversations. My purpose is to challenge conventional wisdom and get people thinking more deeply about these issues. People might not agree with everything I'm going to say, but I want them to think, because I think it's very pathetic the way people understand anti-Semitism. I think it's and even the nature of who the Jewish people are. It's so superficial, and it's come to be accepted. So this book comes and challenges them. So therefore, I wanted a title of the book that would also be provocative, get you thinking, and hopefully be sticky. So in the brainstorm, we came up, Who's Afraid of the Big Bad Jew? And what I liked about it very much is because one of the things that we talk about, especially with regards, we go in depth in the book on anti-Semitism, and especially Adolf Hitler's worldview, is that people think he hated our guts, hated the Jewish people's guts, and that's why he wanted to do it. He's a maniac, and he hated us. He was possessed with hatred. And what I point out in the book, based on his ideology and his words, his spoken and written words that I've studied, is that he was afraid of us. It was much more fear-based than hate-based. So who's afraid of the big bad Jew? And we have that image in the cover of Hitler looking up in fear at the big bad Jew, who's a good-looking, handsome guy. I'm not that good looking. But the idea is that there's a fear involved. And this is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to help Jewish moral self-confidence be strengthened. Jews today, young Jews, they've been weakened. We've been weakened as a people from 2,000 years of exile, anti-Semitism, and being treated as second class. Of course, it's had a huge psychological negative impact on our psyche. And with this book, I'm trying to say we need to regain our moral self-confidence. And if we understand that they look at us with fear because of our spiritual power and our greatness, then we can reframe how we look at ourselves and our self-image. So that's the idea, is we understand the nature of anti-Semitism, we can then understand the nature of who we are. And that can actually strengthen us. And that's an insight in the book.
I think you've done it.
Thank you.
I'm not even exaggerating, because I'm new to this, right? And so I haven't read a lot of books. I know some general history, but what you pulled into this, I got to tell you, your analysis from the historical perspective to the biblical or Torah perspective, all of it it pulls together so well. And I think that especially young Jews, but Jewish people certainly, and hopefully I think non-Jewish people can learn a lot from the book. I think you pulled it off very, very well, in my opinion.
I appreciate that.
Really, but I'll just hone in on one thing. Hitler, you mentioned quite a lot in this book. Quite a lot. And the fact that you believe, based on all your analysis, all your that he was afraid of the Jewish people, but also, I think what you explain in here, it seems to me that he really, really understood who the Jewish people are. He was a really smart guy.
He was an evil genius. Yes,
Yes.
an evil genius. And for the audience, I'll explain that very briefly. That the book goes into it much more depth because, again, I am not projecting anything onto Adolf Hitler. In the book, I explain what Hitler explains, but it's a big insight for people to hear because we've been, I would say, brainwashed. We've been brainwashed by the conventional wisdom, the academics, and whoever else to think that Hitler was just a irrational maniac, megalomaniac.
Was crazy.
Right, that he was a nut job. And if there's a nut job, there can't be any coherent ideas in there. But think about it for a moment. Germany was the most intellectual, sophisticated country on the planet. It was the intellectual leaders. It had the best universities. It was the best economy. It was the leader of the world. And for them to think that they somehow got completely brainwashed and carried away by someone who's a great speaker with zero ideas. That's what we've been told to believe. This is a nut job, a maniac with zero coherent ideas, but he's a great speaker. And somehow he hijacked the most sophisticated, intellectual, intelligent nation on the planet. It's absurd, but we've been raised to believe that. And what I expose in the book is real thinking, which is so obvious if you read Mein Kampf or any of his books or any of his private talks or his speeches. It's so obvious to put it together when you read it. And that is that he viewed the world as fundamentally two possible ideologies. One, the idea of natural law, like the animal kingdom, survival of the fittest that Darwin identified, which means might makes right. Stronger animals kill weaker animals, the stronger species survive, the stronger within the species survives, and as a result, the animal kingdom evolves and gets stronger and stronger with time, and the weak disappear. That's a good thing. That's how the animal kingdom works. Social Darwinism, which wasn't Hitler's idea, but it was popular in Europe, says that the same ideas apply to man. And so mankind, instead of species, it's nations, and stronger nations should subdue weaker nations, and the weaker nations should die off. And as a result, just like the animal kingdom strengthens and the weaker die off, so that should be with humanity. So Hitler understood that's how the world should work. And these ideas were popular in Europe in the 1900s and the 2000s. And Hitler identified, along with many people before him, he identified that against that value system was the value system of love. Against that value system was the value system of peace on earth, equality of all mankind, democratic values, love your neighbor, help the weak, help the poor. All these values opposed the social Darwinistic idea. So Hitler said, those are dangerous. Those are really bad ideas. And if they succeed, they will destroy humanity because mankind's not going to evolve. And then he looks at the world and he says, oh my gosh, those ideas have taken control through Christianity, and they're all Jewish values. And Bolshevism was a threat. So this is the nutshell of Hitler's view. I'll cut it, but just to give people a sense, he understood that Jews had brought these ideas into the world and they've been successful, and therefore the Jews and those values need to be destroyed. And that's why he went on his mission. And so it was very logical. It was from that ideological perspective.
Yeah, and it wasn't just the Jews. Then we had Christians, and then keep moving through this. And so,
yeah, most people don't realize that he was going to destroy Christianity
yes,
as well. because he was being patient. He knew during the war, it's not the time, Germany's a Christian country. But he said over and over again that Christianity and Nazism cannot exist together. Religion and Nazism cannot exist together. He was just being patient. He thought it would die by itself because it was decaying already. And but he was determined to destroy the church because it's Judeo-Christian values, and that's why this book has also a universal message. This is very relevant to Christians because it's of all good people need to understand the values that we should all embrace to make a better world.
Absolutely. I think
Ah.
it's just a super job, really, for me, and I think millions of others would.
Well, you're getting a sneak peek, so I'm really appreciative. It's just being released October 7th, and I'm very excited to have people like you get a sneak peek of the book, and I'm encouraged by your enthusiasm.
Okay, so Raphael, let's talk about what, in my humble opinion, is the best section of the book, which is entitled Stories of Jewish Moral and Spiritual Responses. And the reason, of course, that I say the best is because I am actually in this book, and I am deeply honored to be in your book with none other than Queen Esther.
You like that section?
I thought it was great. So thank you for including me there. I really appreciate that.
100%. Well, I'll tell you something on that you see, Liz, you point out you grew up in West Texas and you didn't have much of Jewish education, and now you're finding out. You should know, in many ways, you're in a advantaged position to find out about Judaism, because many people like myself was given a little bit when I grew up. I was given a little bit. That little bit damaged me because it gave me the wrong ideas. You're a clean slate. You're a clean slate. And when you write on a clean slate, it's clearer. So you actually have a certain advantage perspective. And so when you're learning about this fresh, it's like, wow, it pops and it's fascinating, etc. You don't have to undo some mistaken ideas that a lot of people have about Judaism and, religion. So the book does talk about a lot of those things, and you're in a privileged position because now if you read some other books on Judaism, you'll understand it better, because there's a lot of confusion out there, a lot of confusion about who the Jewish people are and
Absolutely.
why anti-Semitism.
Yeah, the timing was just perfect because I actually got it. Meaning, you've talked about the clean slate. Your slate can be too clean. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. That's why, man, maybe I'll tell your audience why you're in the book. So this last chapter of the book, I'm basically trying to bring down the ideas for practical application. The idea is the book carries two very strong messages: to a universal message for everybody, Christians, non-Jews, everybody, to embrace these values, Judeo-Christian values, and be on the right side of history, which happens to mean in this situation to be with Israel and against genocidal terrorists, which today seems to be a confusing issue for many people for some weird reason. But I'm encouraging that universal message of get on the right side of history. And then for Jews, it's even more particular. It's like, embrace who you are, love who you are. You're part of this incredible heritage that have made such a beautiful impact on humanity, because we have such a great legacy and such wisdom. But unfortunately, many Jews don't know about it. So embrace it and love it and find out more and learn more about it. So that's my general message. But then I bring it down by sharing a dozen or so stories of people who, what I call moral and spiritual responses to Jew hatred, to anti-Semitism. And those are positive, inspiring stories of people who, in the face of hatred, in the face of anti-Semitism, in the face of October 7th, in many cases, they've responded by saying, I'm going to become more Jewish. They hate me for being Jewish. I'm going to become more Jewish. They're hating Judeo-Christian values. I'm going to stand up for Judeo-Christian values. And Liz, you're a good example. October 7th, you woke up. You said, let me find out. Let me find out. That's why I shared your story in there as well.
Well, thank you.
I think it'll be inspirational for many people.
Well, Raphael, we're going to wrap it, but we want to let folks know the book. It's being released. You said October 7th. Where can folks find you and everything about? Yeah.
Okay. So the book is available. The website is bigbadjew.com. Easy to remember. It'll also be, can find out about both the book and a companion film that I've made, Liz. We didn't even talk about it.
Oh.
But actually, I'm in Florida right now visiting because tomorrow night is the premiere of the companion film called Tragic Awakening, a new look at the oldest hatred. And that's about an hour-long film, and it explores some of the same topics. That's available at tragicawakening.com. Both products are available at raphaelshore.com. My name, Raphael Shore, Raphael Shore.com. And then you can find out about both the film and the book. You can watch the film there. You can order the book. And of course, the book will be available. Who's Afraid to Be Bad Jew will be available on Amazon and everywhere else. So I'm encouraging your audience, it's available. Please get it. If you're interested in bringing the film to your community, if you want me to speak, I'll be happy to participate. Just contact me at raphaelshore.com.
So this is awesome. And I've been saying you're pronouncing your first name wrong the entire time. I apologize.
What did you say?
Raphael.
That's fine. Raphael.
Hey, Raphael, thank you for joining me today.
Well, I hope y'all enjoyed that chat with Raphael Shore as much as I did. Now for my 2 cents. As I said at the beginning of this podcast, the reason I'm popping this episode here right now is basically the reason that Raphael, finally, after 30 years of working on his book, published it. And I don't believe in coincidences, because honestly, just to repeat, my very first thoughts as I was hearing about the October 7th massacre was, why the Jews? Why always the Jews? And this is the first time I've ever read a book on Jew hatred in my entire life. It only made sense to jump in right now to talk about this. There is so much information in this book, most of it admittedly new to me. And I know that there are literally thousands of books and articles, et cetera, out there attempting to explain why for thousands of years the Jews, and only the Jews, have been a consistent target of hate and annihilation. But for me, a Jewish newbie, this book was simple enough for me to follow, so much so that I really couldn't put it down. It provided me with historical and biblical facts, with, of course, Raphael's added perspectives based on these facts that absolutely made perfect sense to me. Now, there is a section of this book that really blew my mind, even more than the section that I'm in. And by the way, you will have to buy the book in order to read the section where Raphael shares my story, but I digress. Anyway, the section of the book I'm referring to provides us with a timeline, and I would call it a genocidal timeline of the countless attempts to completely erase the Jewish people from the planet. And though I, of course, knew of the Holocaust like most folks do, I had no idea about the extent of the persecution and attempts to eliminate the Jewish people from the planet for thousands of years. And I don't think that Raphael will be upset if I share this genocidal timeline with y'all, which, by the way, only hits the largest, the most egregious attempts to eliminate the Jewish people from the planet. There are, as we saw on October 7th, hundreds more that have taken place over history, and these attempted genocides against the Jewish people, unlike the lies that millions of people believe today about Israel committing genocide against the Gazan people, are real and not fake news. So here we go. 3,300 years ago, the superpower of the day was Egypt, who brutally enslaved the Jewish people for over 200 years. Yet the Jewish people emerged with the Torah to share with the world its lessons of love, freedom, and justice. 2,500 years ago, the superpower of the day was Persia, today's Iran, who declared genocide against the Jewish people who survived and rebuilt the Second Temple. 2,200 years ago, the superpower of the day was Greece, and they declared war on the Torah and the Jewish religion, and the Jewish people survived. 2,000 years ago, the superpower of the day was the Roman Empire, who crushed Jerusalem, destroyed the Second Temple, and slaughtered over 1 million people. For 1,300 years then, the European Christian Empire relentlessly persecuted the Jews through pogroms, forced conversions, inquisitions, ghettos, and economic exclusions to prove that the Jews were now despised by God. For 1,400 years, Jews were, together with the Christians, by the way, given the status of dhimmi, which is legally second-class citizens. And just 100 years ago, the Russian communists declared Judaism obsolete, and about 8 years later, 1 million Soviet Jews emerged and made Aliyah, meaning they moved to Israel, helping it become the startup nation. And then, just 90 years ago, Hitler decided humanity needed a final solution to the Jewish problem. He built the superpower of the day and executed mankind's most ruthless and systematic genocide, killing 6 million Jews. Then, after World War II, the Arab and Islamic world, the one Nazi ally that escaped undefeated and unrepented, carried on the battle in Hitler's shadow. And I will add, which continues today, as evidenced by the October 7th massacre. But for me, this genocidal timeline confirmed the bright side of the Jewish story. Because after Raphael walked us through what he believes to be the whys of Jewish hate, he then takes a 180-degree turn to present us with the bright side of the whys of Jewish hate and how we, the Jewish people, can fight against this hate. And I love that. In closing, the following is what Raphael had to say before he presented his genocidal timeline. He states, Adolf Hitler was right to fear the Jews. The Jewish people are the burning bush that will not be consumed. So though I am learning more and more every day about my faith and how, in fact, the Jewish people are God's chosen people, a people that he promises he will never forsake, this genocidal timeline confirmed to me that this is true. We, the Jewish people, will live for eternity no matter what they do to us. And as my friend Sonia and I proclaimed back in an earlier podcast, Am Yisrael Chai, the people of Israel live. Thank you all for joining me today on A Journey to Milk and Honey. Before you go, don't forget that you can stay connected with us on social media, as we're on all major platforms at JMH Podcast, and we would love to hear from you. You can also find us on YouTube at JMH Podcast or A Journey to Milk and Honey. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications, as it really helps out our channel. And wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure to follow us there to stay updated on new episodes and to keep your journey going. If you're looking for more, you can visit us online at ajourneytomilkandhoney.com or jmhpodcast.com. Oh, and by the way, if you enjoyed this podcast, please take a moment to leave a review or comment, as your feedback helps the podcast to grow and improve, and we truly value your support. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, and shalom.